Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Today I want to talk about why I like being a Muslim, why I like Islam. Now, many people come to Islam for various reasons of their own, and various people experience being Muslim in different ways, in their own unique way, and they all have their own journeys that they travel along through the experiences of being Muslim. And I thought I share my experience. And why I want to share my experience is because many people who do share their experiences talk about the journey of Islam as having converted to Islam. So they were Christian or Hindu or Buddhist or Jewish and became Muslim. And then they talk about, Islam from the perspective of a convert, and then also with the luxury, in a sense, to contrast their Islam with their lives prior to Islam. Now, that is obviously very interesting and very enlightening in many ways, but I want to talk about Islam from the perspective of being a Muslim, being born Muslim. Okay, so my sort of experience of Islam having been born a Muslim. Now, I'll start from the beginning. Okay, so I am a South African. I'm 38 years old. I have been born and raised in the city of Cape Town, South Africa. Born to Muslim parents, raised in a Muslim family. My father was the first imam of the local mosque. He is Hafidh al-Quran, and he studied to be a cleric, an imam. So I grew up in a household of a very learned Muslim person, my father, and also a very strict Muslim. So I grew up with the religion being taught and also being enforced, you can say, in my household. So, for example, my father had us pray our 5 daily prayers from the beginning, since ever I can remember. He would even wake you up, at night, just to ask you if you prayed already before we went to sleep. So after Fajr in the morning, after the morning prayer, my father would teach us the Quran. I grew up memorizing good chunks of the Quran. I grew up learning Arabic. I grew up learning many Islamic subjects, let's put it that way, from my father initially. And then later on, I also went to study these subjects at the Islamic University in Cape Town. IPSA, it's called today, the International Peace University of South Africa. And also, of course, I've done a lot of research and studying on my own over the years. So I have a journey through the religion, within the religious tradition, and with contending, ideas also within the religion. So I'm going to talk about that. I want to talk about it from that sort of angle, because I don't think enough people speak about the religion from the perspective of being born and raised within it. So when I was we'll start my journey when I became sort of more or less cognizant of my free will and wanting to express my own agency, which I think happens for most young men at around 12, 13 years old, 15 years old. Okay? So we'll start my journey there. So when I was about, let's say, 14, 15 years old, and I used to fast Mondays and Thursdays and pray 5 times a day, which was our practice, our household practice. My grandmother used to always fast Monday, Thursday, and the three middle days of the Islamic calendar, the white days, as it is known. And I grew up doing that. And of course, I used to compete with my grandmother to see who can recite the most Quran every month. So we had that constant competition going. And so you could say that I was really what you might say in the Muslim world, at least for a young person, I was sort of a model Muslim person. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have, as time went on, I didn't have my doubts about my religion. When I was about, say, 15 years old, I wondered whether it was really necessary to live such an extremely disciplined life. To always be up at 5, 6 in the morning, to have to pray the morning prayer, to pray 5 times a day, to adhere to all these rules, to not be able to have a girlfriend, etc. All the regular things that Muslim youth contend with. But obviously now they have a lot more to contend with because of social media. I grew up before social media and cell phones. And I sort of questioned those things. And I made a resolution. One day I came home from school and I was sitting on my prayer mat. It was before the afternoon prayer. I was waiting for the afternoon prayer because what would happen is I would come home, rush to pray the early afternoon prayer, Salat al-Dhuhr, and then wait for the call to prayer for Salat al-Asr, the late afternoon prayer, so I could pray and leave because I needed to go to karate. And this day I sat on my prayer mat waiting, and I thought to myself, why am I even waiting? I didn't really feel like waiting. I just wanted to go. I was like, it was always a rush for me to finish pray and then rush off to karate and get there in time. It was like at that time of the year where it fell in that time zone sort of thing. So I waited, and then I decided I'll pray. And I said, look, I said to Allah, to God, I know that you exist. I don't deny that. I don't question that. But do I really need to be Muslim? Really? Do I really need to do all this whole performance of praying 5 times a day and all these things? I can also just not be Muslim, which was my thinking. I was like, this is maybe just too much. This very disciplined lifestyle that I grew up being engaged in all my life. And then I prayed the prayer and I left to go to karate. So, long story short, during that week I had a series of accidents. On that day, I fell off my bicycle, actually. I used to cycle. And I scraped the back part of my hand completely open. And I got up and then just continued. I was very tough as a kid and didn't think much of it. But then I had another accident and another accident throughout that week and probably into the next week. I don't remember exactly. And then it dawned on me, as I was lying there in the middle of the street with my next accident, with the final of the accidents, because I fell off my rollerblades and then I tried to get onto the pavement with my bicycle, but at the wrong angle, because an ambulance came past me in a hurry and I tried to get out of the way, and so it was the wrong angle and I fell, basically. So as I was lying there on the pavement, it dawned on me, that I needed to stay Muslim, basically. This was the sign from God, I believe. This was the sign from Allah that I needed to stay a Muslim. So I thought, okay, fair enough. Muslim it is. But then I said, okay, look, if I am going to be a Muslim, because now Allah has directed me to be Muslim, I have to know what Islam is. Now, obviously, it's not that I didn't know about Islam, or I haven't sort of traditionally learned about Islam in my family, but I felt like I didn't know enough. Like, it wasn't enough for me to pray 5 times a day and fast and read the Quran and not really know what it is. Like, why am I doing it? The why, instead of only the how. Look, when you grow up Muslim, you learn the how. You should make salah. Why should you make salah? For Allah, because Allah commanded it. So you just know the briefly the why, and the why is always because Allah commanded it, and the how, that's what you focus on. And that's fine. I'm not bemoaning that at all. But I reached the point where now I felt that wasn't enough. And so I set out to read the Quran. Now, of course, I know I've said now that I've been reading the Quran continuously, and I was reciting the Quran in Arabic, but I wasn't able, or I didn't know enough Arabic to know what I was reciting. I could here and there make up what I was reciting because of the little bit of Arabic my father had taught me, which was by the way, which is along the way of learning the Quran, I'd learned some Arabic. But it wasn't enough to fully engage the Quran in Arabic anyway. So I decided, okay, look, I'm going to flip open a translation and read the translation. So what I would do then, instead of just reciting the Quran in Arabic, I would read the Quran, like the Arabic part and the English part, the Arabic part, the English part. So I did that exercise for a long time. Actually, several years I would do that. And even now I still do that. Sometimes when I am contemplating verses of the Quran, I would look at several translations to see what shade of meaning various translators give, because Arabic is not my mother tongue. So anyway, I did that, and then I was like, oh my God, is this what it is? I mean, if Islam is what the Quran says, then this is amazing. I really like this religion. But I also realized at the same time that much of my traditional upbringing, or what I associated with Islam culturally, and even religiously to some extent, was absent, didn't exist in the Quran a lot of the time, or was distorted, meaning that it did exist in the Quran, but not in the way that we understood it from a societal and traditional perspective. And that troubled me a lot. So I found myself very committed to the Quran and very much in love with the Quran, which I still am. But I realized that there was a strong divergence from the Quran within the traditional Islam that I was used to. And I don't mean it in a bad way, and I'm not sort of pointing fingers at anyone. And I think it more has to do with not the tradition, but the focus areas. And I'll get more to that later. And so I sort of wondered now that to myself, that if that were the case, if there was this divergence between popular Islam and the Quran itself, which is the word of God, which is actually the revelation, which is the point of why Allah sent His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then there must be there's something going on here. Let's put it that way. and I set out to sort of build myself up as a Muslim from the base. So I said, okay, let's start from zero. As my good friend Saleh, who passed away, Allah yarhamu, used to always say, Muhammad, you gotta start from zero. So I thought, let's do that. Let's go through the exercise now that I'm a young adult to start from zero. Okay? And I took it from there. And I said, okay, so let me first interrogate my belief in God. That's where I started. Okay, so I always believed in God, I believed in Allah, but I thought to myself, let me interrogate what I actually believe about Allah and see where that tallies with the Quran or not. And I'm going to tell you one experience of this process, because for me it was a journey. I was one day in Mecca. I went on Umrah at the age of 18 with my aunt, Auntie Fatima, Allah yarhamha, also passed away. And you know, there's this ayah in the Quran, or this many ayat that constantly say, you know, that Allah's decree is over everything. Inna Allaha ala kulli shay'in qadir. So there are many ayat like that, and it's usually, you know, mentioned after sort of a segment in the Quran, you know, and then it's like a reminder. So I sort of wondered about that, because I also have a strong tendency to look at the world through the lens of science. I like science, and I'm very much for empiricism and proofs and systems and functions and things like that. So I always had that tendency to look at the world in a sense, in a sort of cold scientific way. Okay, what are the cause and effects? Why does it happen? This is the reason. Okay, check. That was sort of my mentality always. So I asked myself about this ayah a lot. You know, I used to come across it and I used to wonder about it. What did I wonder about it? I thought to myself, look, we have cause and effect in the world. And for every thing that happens, we can attribute a cause. Like, for example, if I throw a rock up in the air and it comes down, we will attribute the fact that I threw the rock in the air, that's why it's coming down. There's a reason. Okay, there's a cause. And because causes seem to be natural, okay, like for example, when it rains, it's due to evaporation, precipitation, right? The water is evaporated, it gets heavy in the air, it gets cold up there, it ferments as the droplets come together and it rains. Okay, we understand the process. We understand the process, and to the extent that we can understand the process, at some level we can even control the process. So when you look at the world of cause and effect, you think to yourself that, look, you don't automatically recognize that Allah is in control of all this. You see it as being a system, okay? And you think to yourself, I mean, at 18, this is what I thought. I thought to myself, look, so Allah created everything as a system, and now the system functions perfectly. So there's, like, so to say, no involvement, okay, from Allah. This is kind of the rationalist sort of thinking that I had. But it bothered me, because that was my thinking, but it bothered me. I felt like there was something I was missing. So I said, you know what? I'm in Mecca. let me make dua. Let me ask Allah to guide me as to the meaning of this. I'm going to tell you the story, right? So we went, at this point later on, we were in Medina, and we had stayed there until the end of the month of Ramadan, and we had Eid and everything. After a few days, I think 2-3 days after Eid, we left Medina. Okay, and this whole journey was in a way about this one verse. Okay, and I was sitting on the bus, and I fell asleep. And the bus had stopped for Salatul Asr. Now, because I was a traveler, I had already prayed the prayers, Salatul Dhuhr and Salatul Asr, in the Masjid al-Nabawi. So I didn't need to get off the bus. So when the bus had stopped, I just continued sleeping. And I fell into a deep sleep. And in my sleep, I dreamt I was sitting at a table. And I was served chicken. Okay, like chicken and rice. I can't remember if it was chicken and rice or chicken and bread, but kapsa, the normal thing they eat in Arabia. And while I was eating this chicken, these cats came in and they started meowing. Meow, meow, meow. And jumping up and down. They wanted, obviously, some chicken. And as I was having this dream, my friend Adnan Sab, he was a Pakistani guy, we called him Adnan Sab. He came and he woke me up and he said, Bhai, come and eat with us. I got up half asleep. Okay, he woke me up. I walked into the place. And it looked very familiar. And then I had that strange, deja vu feeling. And then I sat down, still kind of waking up, and the food came. And it was the chicken, the kapsa. And I started eating. And still I had this strange, familiar feeling. But then, what happened? The cats came in. The same cats. And they started meowing. And then, I just started shouting. I said, Subhanallah. People didn't know what was happening to me. But I was like, my hair was standing up, so I felt like. Because it was now just like a matter of minutes that all this happened. And I realized, Inna Allaha ala kulli shay'in qadir. It was literal. It was actually literal. It was actually just as it says in the Quran, that everything has been decreed we usually translate it over everything is Allah's decree, but actually what it means is that everything has been decreed. But in a way, of course, we cannot fathom, because this is unfathomable. You can't actually fathom it. And so this was the start of my sort of my journey, sort of, this is one of the major stopping points on my journey within Islam. And I'll continue with the next segment, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.